1961 was a very important year for me. As a graduating senior, I was just looking forward to going off into the world to just pursue my dreams. But little did I know that my dreams, based on my participation in the civil rights movement as a student activist at UCLA, was going to take a turn. Most of us who were active chose to join the Congress of Racial Equality, the student chapter at UCLA. And during the spring of 1961, folks in the Congress of Racial Equality at the national level came up with a strategy to attempt to break segregation in interstate transportation and transportation facilities. That's buses, airplanes, where we're talking about the Greyhound stations, the Trailway stations, the railroad stations. And they focused on transportation because it was so vital in the lives of people in the South, and especially young people. Most of the young people who were involved in the freedom rides in the South were Black. But for those of us outside, we were integrated groups of people. Black, white, old, young. We even had some people from the Los Angeles trip who had not yet even obtained their American citizenship, Europeans. And then among our friends, the UCLA team had two Pedrons, Joe Gerbach and Max Pavlicek, two young men, San Pedro High grads, UCLA grads, who were Croatians. The Freedom Rides started out from Washington, D.C., and things were pretty much uneventful until folks on the Freedom Ride got to the South. And then there was an incident in Alabama where the Freedom Rides literally stopped because of the repression that took place, the violence that had taken place on the bus ride. The sponsors of the Freedom Ride, Congress of Racial Equality, basically said, it's all over. We can't continue to go on our goals of Washington, D.C. to New Orleans, Louisiana. And a funny thing happened. Student activists like myself and others at UCLA at the time said, we're not going to let the Freedom Rides fail. We're going to step in and do something about it. The goal was to facilitate the rides. It meant being nonviolent. Nonviolent meant that if you chose to be a volunteer, understand that if you're sitting at a lunch counter and you order a cup of coffee or a meal, there's a probability you won't be served. There's a probability that there will be resistance to your being there by others showing up and doing you bodily harm. Can you take it? Would you be willing to put yourself at that kind of risk? And then once law enforcement comes, law enforcement is not going to be there to protect you from those who are intimidating you. You're going to be arrested for sitting down at a lunch counter. Black person, because those lunch counters that we would be going to were for whites, for the majority population. Wow. Took a lot of courage to be part of a group that shared that kind of courage in confronting something that we were supposed to be able to do freely in the United States as American citizens. But the contradiction existed, and we were committed to make sure that this particular aspect of our protest against that segregation was going to prevail. So that contribution for those of us who were on those rides led to some decisions being made at the national level to say, you all who are in the business of transportation in the United States, you cannot segregate on the basis of race. And in the fall, as a result of the intervention of the Kennedy administration, the Interstate Commerce Commission pulled the providers of transportation nationally together and said, it's over. So at a particular time or date, it just ended. So in railroad stations, bus stations, airports, where it existed, the barriers came down to access to public facilities. And at the time, that was a really big deal. And it was a bigger deal because of the role that young people played in bearing witness and going to jail. People really paid a price for that. And then most certainly for those who are our colleagues who were beaten, because those beatings, especially of the men on the Los Angeles trip, affected those men for the rest of their lives. With two of them in particular, it shortened their lives. One gentleman had his head bashed in. Another had his neck almost broken. But they did that because they believed in the right of all Americans to be able to move in public transportation and go to places of public accommodation.